The Dean Obeidallah Show. Right now, very happy to have on the show Bill Adair, a professor of journalism and public policy at the Duke University, which is not a safety school. He is director of Duke Reporters Lab. He a Pulitzer Prize winner for his national reporting. He's the creator of PolitiFact and has a brand new book, Beyond the Big Lie: The Epidemic of Political Lying, Why Republicans Do It More, and How It Could Burn Down Our Democracy. Bill, perfect timing because the lies just won't stop. I mean, you're in the lying business and you got a lot. This is it.
It is peak lying season. It's a good time for apples, football, and lying.
There's no doubt. So, look, I read in your book, like you were younger, like 2000s, you wanted to become a fact checker. And like most kids dream of baseball or basketball star. And like, were you fact checking your parents, like, and friends? Like, that's two Pinocchios. Dad, that's a pants on fire. Like, how did that work out?
Right, exactly. It actually started when I was in college. I was a student at Arizona State University, studying political science, and I was watching this campaign um, in the 1980s in Arizona over an initiative on whether to regulate hospitals. And there were a lot of lies in the campaign commercials. And there was a little bit of fact checking by the Arizona Republic, but not much. And so I wrote a report, my independent study, my senior year, on the need for journalists to do more fact checking. And that kind of hung with me. I became a journalist. First I was a local journalist, and I covered aviation, and then I got to covering politics. And I really always thought we need to do more fact checking. And so by the time I got to Washington as a Washington reporter, it really kind of firmed up with me. And so I went to my editors and said, let's do this. And so in 2007, I created PolitiFact, the fact-checking website.
Mhm.
And that did well. We fact checking had been around before that, but what we did was different was we developed a rating system on our truthometer,
Right.
and that allowed us to keep score to figure out how many true and false and half true statements a politician had been rated on. And I think that was really valuable to people, and that sparked a lot of similar fact-checking sites in the United States and also around the world.
Is there competition among fact checkers? Like, we should have thought of the Pinocchios. The Washington Post sucks. Like, how dare they? This is ridiculous. Like, have you ever seen others who fact check? You're like, you guys are just not. I should fact check the fact checkers. Has it ever gotten to that?
So, to the first point, fact checkers are very collegial.
Ah, that's nice.
Glenn Kessler, the Washington
Mhm.
Post fact checker, is
Uh-huh.
a great friend. We work together on a lot of things, and we admire each other's work. So when I was editor of PolitiFact, was really an admirer of his work, and we would often cite each other. That still happens. I've left PolitiFact since I came to Duke, but you still see this a lot where fact checkers will cite each other. Um, the and then your other question was
The Have you ever fact checked the fact checkers? Has that
fact
ever
check the
gotten to that
fact
point?
checkers. So that's not something that fact checkers do, but there's plenty of scrutiny of fact checkers.
Sure.
And this is healthy, I think. Um, Parties will often question our ratings, will come out and say, "Hey, we think you got this one wrong." And sometimes when I was editor, and even today, PolitiFact will make a call that is wrong, usually by a notch. They had one the
Sure.
other day, and I thought, I think they were off by a notch. That happens now and then. That's normal. It's a judgment call, even after you've done all the research that PolitiFact does to reach a conclusion. It's a judgment call of how to rate it on the truthometer.
And I'm talking about Bill Adair about his new book, Beyond the Big Lie: The Epidemic of Political Lying, Why Republicans Do It More, and How It Can Burn Down Our Democracy. So, Bill, obviously, fact checking has become more challenging. There's no doubt. And we understand politicians lie in general because they think it helps them, whatever the lie might be. That could be an overstatement. But what I find so insidious and dangerous about Donald Trump is his lies are also designed to delegitimize fact checkers, delegitimize any referee who is calling him out. And is this new in that the way? I mean, I know that politicians may have said oh, those news don't, the right is long bemoaned, the lamestream media and all that. But with Trump, it seems jarring, honestly, in his level of and attempts to delegitimize anyone who will call out his lies.
Yeah, it's never been done in this volume. In the past, it's not been that unusual that someone would say, "Oh, that's all false." And of course, I think that's one of the sneakiest things that politicians do is when the news media will do a well-researched investigative report or a fact check, and a politician will say, "That's all false." And they won't address what specifically is false. They'll just sort of issue this blanket denial. But with Trump, it's just so um, uh, blunt that it's just like they're the fake news. You can't trust them, and this has such a corrosive effect in every way. I've gone to a Trump rally, and the supporters of the Trump rally look at us in the news media area like we're villains, and you almost worry that they're going to be violent. And we saw it on January 6th that the January 6th rioters gathered up CNN's equipment and tried to light it on fire. It's really troubling what he's done because he's created this hatred of journalists who are independent in nonpartisan, just trying to report the news, and really created a very toxic situation.
Certainly. And what does it say to you when at the vice presidential debate, JD Vance was visibly annoyed when the moderators try to fact check him even slightly on something. And he said, I was told there'd be no fact checking. And you must have been like, wow, that's a
Right.
great line for another book.
How
So what was your
how
reaction to that?
how dare you hold me
I
accountable for
know.
what I say? Well, at least in that same debate, they did cut off his mic.
Hmm.
So I thought that was a little bit of um, reciprocity. I think it spoke for itself in that it showed how these folks don't want to be held accountable. And the same thing happened with Trump not wanting to sit with 60 Minutes for an interview.
Hmm.
And they can get away with it because people's consumption of political journalism has become so partisan. They're getting it through a partisan lens for the most part. And so Trump and Vance believe that their supporters are not getting their political media through a independent media. They're getting it through Fox News and talk radio and conservative media. And they think that they can get away with this. Now, I find that really troubling. I don't know if they can get away with it, but um, when we started PolitiFact in 2007, I was impressed that all campaigns, even and if not particularly the Republican campaigns, took us very seriously. Mitt Romney's campaign, very cooperative. Hey, here's our material.
Hmm.
Then John McCain got the nomination. They were very cooperative. Here's why we said what we said. And 2012, Mitt Romney again, very cooperative with the media. So this is really troubling that they have taken on this attitude, and it has permeated much of the Republican Party. Here in Durham, North Carolina, where I edit a local news site that my students report, we sometimes run into it even at the local level, where the local Republican Party will be like, "We don't talk to the news media. You can find our positions on the web," and that's not good. We need to have accountability.
Yeah, and that's the challenge. And in your book, you have certain suggestions, and we'll get to that in a minute. What I find is so difficult with Trump is that he is cut out Fox News in certain circumstances. He goes right to them on Truth Social. I interviewed Jason Selvig from The Good Liars. They're the comedy duo, and they go to different things. And Jason's also while he's a comedy person, also very thoughtful. And we talked about what it was like to speak to the Trump supporters. And he said to me, one of the most jarring things from him is that people get their news from Trump. When Trump says it, they accept it. And that's a deeper issue here because it doesn't matter what you say, it doesn't matter what fact checkers say. I can understand why they don't want to be fact checked on TV to their face, because that can make someone watching go like, "Oh, what's going on here? I know that moderator, that person's a legitimate newscaster. Why are they saying this?" But in reality, so many Trumpers get directly from him. So how is any fact checking ever going to be effective against this guy?
Well, this concept, sort of going over the heads of the news media directly to the people, that's not new. If you
Right.
think about Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he did that with his fireside chats.
Mhm.
Hey, I want to talk directly to you, America. Um, and so that's something that American politicians have always tried to do. Um, what's different now is the volume that it's done, and that it's often done with an adoring partisan media that will not hold him accountable for what he says and will also cheer him on. And as we saw after the 2020 election, the lying was not only echoed by conservative media, but when Fox didn't go along with the lying, Fox lost viewers. And
Mhm.
so that's really worrisome about the state of political information these days. And it makes me really hope that there will be some reset within the Fox News channel at some point, depending on who ends up running the Fox News channel.
Okay, I'm not sure that will happen because it's a business decision, right?
Right.
If it's in their
Notice I
best
said
business,
hope.
right,
Yeah.
right. But it is fair to hope that, because if from a business point of view, from a revenue point of view, if it makes sense to do a reset for whatever reason, then they maybe do that. Because every decision in corporate media, especially the publicly traded companies, are about revenue and shareholder value and all that kind of stuff. And talk about partisan media. It's not that it's new. From the days of George Washington, there was partisan media. People said, I just finished, Ron Cherno's book on Washington, and I already had read the Hamilton one, but I mean, and I had read this stuff before, but when you read it there, the vile stuff they said about George Washington, the father of the country, he led our army in the Revolutionary War, and they were calling him a secret spy for the British, and he's really a monarchist, and you're like, it's George Washington, what's wrong with you people? But that was the articles of time, and some were written by either Jefferson or Madison, who were close to him, under fake names, or they were fueling it. Like, these guys were at each other's throats from day one. It's just not day one, but a short time into certainly in his second term, they really went at him very hard. So partisan media's always been there. There must have been resets in the history where it went too far and people are like, okay. And so we're at a point where we need a reset.
Well, what would be fun would be to go back and do an exercise where we create the ye old truthometer, and basically do put put those guys to the truthometer the way that we do today, and see how many pants on fires they would get. It would be
That would be great. I
it
think
would be
that's a great idea. You should write that as a book.
it would
The
be
line
britches on
began,
fire.
right.
Yeah,
It was just funny. The line, britches on fire. It's very funny. And the line began day one. Like, we've always lied about politics. And here's
right.
Washington. Even though I've
So
never,
here's
go ahead.
to answer your question about the media and a reset. I do think that to have a reset, um, historically, what has driven the media in this country, and this is somewhat different depending on the country, um, has been commercial interests.
Mm-hmm.
So when we think about the Associated Press, we may think, wow, this great independent news organization and whatever. Well, it sprung up out of commercial interests of newspapers wanting to get all together and share content in the late 1800s. And the penny press, the whole idea of um, uh, having newspapers that were not partisan, like you were describing, like they had been in
Mm-hmm.
colonial times, but having newspapers that sought a more general audience, that was also driven by commercial interest. And so, how do we get to that? How do we get to that point? Well, right now, narrow audiences are seem to be the most lucrative. They're the most passionate. You can identify an audience, feed it these tasty morsels of juicy, sugary, partisan, often fact-free content, and make a lot of money. So what we have to do is figure out some economic model or a policy that encourages that economic model that gets us back to fact, nutritious journalism, so that we get back to that sort of journalism for the masses. And right now, we're not quite there. Now, there are some interesting proposals in both Congress and some state legislatures that would it would provide some tax incentives for more journalism. So we'll see where that goes.
Well, so I'm talking with Bill Adair about his new book, Beyond the Big Lie, the epidemic of political lying, why Republicans do it more, and how it could burn down our democracy. You had a great line in your book. You wrote, in more than 40 years as a journalist, I never heard a reporter ask a politician, why do you lie? And I'm like, what a great question. Well, I would just love a reporter to ask Trump, why do you lie? And we know he'll spin it, but why is that important to you? Like, what do you hope to hear from the politician?
Well, you almost have to take Trump out of so much of this,
Okay.
because he just has no credibility.
Right.
One of my colleagues said, PolitiFact will fact check a claim about Trump and say, like, on abortion, and they'll say, Trump's going to lead to a nationwide ban on abortions, and PolitiFact will say, well, he says he's not going to do that. And my colleague's like, how can you believe anything Trump says? This is a guy who's, gotten called for thousands of lies. And I think there's some truth to that. No pun intended. So I do think Trump is the ultimate extreme case in political lying, and makes it really hard for fact checkers and journalists to respond. I don't know, it's like he's sort of broken the truthometer. He's broken Pinocchio's nose. Like, how do you, because he doesn't play by the norms of not only American politics, but like society. So, and then he's gotten so much of the Republican Party, if to either look the other way or applaud. So, it's pretty troubling.
It is, and no one understands his base better than Donald Trump. And there was even a clip recently with Laura Ingram saying to him, "You're not going to lock up your political opponents." And the people were like cheering. And he goes, "See, they want it, And she goes, "But she's like, no, you're really not." Like, she was trying to be responsible here, trying to help him, beg him to say, "No, I'm not." And he would not commit to not doing that because he heard the crowd cheer and he knows that's going to make them happy, which is dangerous. So, I mean, we're living through right now a tsunami of lies about a hurricane relief that is dangerous, where people are not going to get FEMA relief because they've been told by Trump and his allies that if you take $750, they can seize your house, or that's all you can get. To other things like, there's no money for you, you're suffering because the Democrats gave it to migrants, which again makes no sense in the big picture of life, because we have all the money we want for anything. We just print it out. There's no limit to how much money the U.S. government has. I mean, there's nothing preventing it. So all that part's a lie. So the last part of your title here is how it could burn down our democracy. And you even write the situation looks bleak, but you get to certain proposals. So because that's what everyone wants. How do we get out of this place where we can agree on what's a fact? Is that too aspirational?
So, I am hopeful here. And the reason is that I think that there's no foundational belief, particularly in the Republican Party, that makes lying a conservative thing, that makes lying a Republican thing. It's just sort of been adopted as a practice more by the Republicans than the Democrats. Now, there's some interesting explanations why that is: shrinking demographics, more use of fear, issues that prey on fear. But the Republicans could turn around tomorrow and say, hey, we're the party of truth. and call out the Democrats for their lies and really pivot and change their behavior. So, but how might we encourage that? So, a couple of different kinds of ideas that I've put in the book, and some of these come from my students here at Duke in a class I taught in lying in politics, which I should be clear was not a class in how to lie in politics. It was a class studying lying in politics.
That was at
Um,
Trump University, that class,
yeah.
not at Duke
So,
University. Different.
so the ideas look at lying in a broad sense, in a political economy. Think of it as a politician lies because they're rewarded for it, or they think they're rewarded. They feel there's an incentive to lie.
Hmm.
So we just need to change the economy. We need to change the incentive and make it an incentive to tell the truth and a disincentive to lie. How do we do that? Well, you got to look at what politicians care about. Well, one thing they really care about, advertising. Advertising on social media, advertising through internet ad networks, because that's how they get to their supporters. And it's so efficient. If you are a politician today, you need to use Facebook, you need to use ad networks to reach your voters. So if we can get those companies to adjust their ad rates based on the fact-checking records of the politicians, raise the rates for the politicians who lie the most, lower the rates for the politicians that have the best records with the fact checkers. What a great incentive that would be to tell the truth. And I think that's a really intriguing idea. It would not take that many companies to do this, and a little bit of courage, but it could be done. Another idea that I think is simple on the other side is to have something similar to what Republicans have about opposing taxes, a pledge. We're gonna pledge not to lie and challenge the Democrats not to lie, and that would become part of their culture. We're against lying, and they would hold each other accountable in the same way that the pledge not to raise taxes, which is a pledge administered by the Americans for Tax Reform, very powerful guy in Washington named Grover Norquist.
I know Grover.
So that could be effective. So those are just a couple
I thought
ideas.
those are interesting
More
ideas
in
that
the book.
you had. I was wondering about raising the rates of ads. If there's some First Amendment implication, because I am a lawyer, and like I wonder if it gets to the Supreme Court, it's never going to be good. But let me ask you, Bill, last question though, about something outside of all of that, and the idea of investing in our education system to teach critical thinking skills. So
Oh,
I
yeah.
beg people all the time on Democrats. I'm a Democrat. I beg people, don't accept everything I say. Don't accept everything that you get from Democrats. Fact check it yourself. Google it. Look at it. You should question it. Don't believe it because it sounds good or because you liked it. Don't believe it because you want to believe it. That's the worst thing. People believe it and they send me something. I go, this is not true. So what do you think about that?
Oh, I think that's a great idea. More states need to require media literacy as part of that. Teach
Ah,
people how to consume media um, uh, more thoughtfully, and understand what they're consuming. They don't know. I was telling somebody earlier today, I think there's a correlation. If you go to a web article, if you see an ad for nail fungus, there's a correlation between that and poor quality of the information in that article. We need to teach people that. So,
that's a good point. The level of
you
the
know,
ads, it's like the ads you see
so
on the subway in New York. Like, I'm not sure I'm going to go to that doctor.
we need to do better. But I'm with you, and I think people need to know what's good information and what's bad information.
Well, Bill, it was nice meeting you at the Safety School of Duke University. And it's just a running joke that Bill did with John Stewart. And my sister went there and her kids went there. And it's a great school. So if she's listening, it's not a safety school, it's a great school. And again, the book, it's a really great book. It's a really quick read. Beyond the Big Lie, the epidemic of political lying, why Republicans do it more, and how it could burn down our democracy. Bill, it was great meeting. Congratulations on the book. And I hope we can chat again because lying is not going to go out of fashion for a while. So it'll be great to have you.
You bet. Anytime, Dean. I really enjoyed it.